Afternoon all, it's Ryan Taylor here, and now that the summer transfer window is open again, it only makes sense to start my YouTube videos back up. Obviously, the channel was started up in January, and I don't think I've uploaded to my channel since around about March. Decided just to take a little bit of a backseat while I was focusing on football and boxing reporting outside of the transfer window. But obviously, as most of you know, transfers are something that I like to focus on, something that I enjoy, and these stories that I like to delve into. So I just wanted to start by kind of explaining something that I just wanted to provide some clarity on kind of my kind of reporting. My weekly column, which is usually uploaded throughout the transfer window, will be back on Tuesday, Taylor's Tuesday transfers. And as well as that, I'll obviously be doing the videos as well, where I'm breaking some of them stories down in further detail. We'll have the Daily Express transfer newsletter as well. If you want to subscribe to that, we can send out some of my stories straight to your inbox. Or alternatively, I'm sure most of you will follow me on Twitter at Ryan Taylor Sport. But the one area I kind of wanted to start with really was I've had a few sort of fan aggregator accounts on Twitter sort of breaking down some of my stories, which, you know, is part and parcel of the job really. You know, the people that run it are very dedicated. You know, they're news outlets that sort of provide 24-hour updates, and, you know, in a way it helps people like myself grow my account and get my stories out there. But the one kind of area that sort of frustrates me with it is sometimes there's a kind of mix up with who originally, you know, who the original source of a story is. If you have a report from Italy, for example, and that's sort of, you know, in the nature of the business we're in, we see those stories sort of rewritten in the English press, and then the story gets pinned on the English publication where it's actually come from the Italian news outlet, which, you know, if someone had actually clicked on the story, then they'd see that it'd say, you know, according to Gazzetta dello Sport or, you know, another Italian newspaper. And the nature of the role I'm currently in, I am sort of covering transfer news that's being published in Italy and France and Germany and Spain. So, you know, you might see a story of mine on a Daily Express website, which is a transfer story that's rewritten. It's about what's being said in the Spanish press. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up. The stories I actually get myself will be very clear on the Express website that that's come from myself. It will say Express Sport Understands, and I'll drive it across my Twitter account. Whereas, you know, if I'm covering a story that's, for example, an Inter Milan sort of development regarding Tottenham, but it's come from the Italian press, always in the story it will say according to. You know, eventually I want to get into a position where I'm able to just cover myself, the stories that I do. But unfortunately, I'm not quite at that level yet. I've only been in the industry sort of 4 years, just under 4 years now. So the nature of the role I'm in, I am sort of required to cover stories from elsewhere. So if it's my reporting, that will be quite clear. It'll be on my Twitter account. I'll be driving it out there. But at the moment, there are sort of stories that I'm covering from abroad. And, you know, a few times I've been credited with that information on Twitter when it's not mine. You know, there's kind of an element of confusion to it, because obviously to a fan or someone who's just watching and reading the news on their phone or on Twitter, you know, they'll see a story and they'll think automatically, because it's on the Mirror website or the Mail website or the Express website, that's where it's come from. But the original source is actually abroad. So I just wanted to clear that up really. As you know, like I said, some people might see some of my stories and, you know, I'm kind of just covering what's been said in the Italian press or the foreign media. So obviously stories from my column, etc., are exclusively sourced. They're sourced by people that I speak to, the contacts that I've built and made. So yeah, hopefully that's kind of just cleared something up moving forward. But I wanted to start with Tottenham really. There's been a lot going on in North London. Obviously, they have 2 signings over the line to date, both free transfers, Fraser Forster and Ivan Perisic. 2 very strong acquisitions really to Antonio Conte's squad, but more are going to follow. And I reported on Sunday, I think it was, that Tottenham are going to firm up their interest in Djed Spence. He's been away on England under-21s international duty, and once that's been completed, I do expect Spurs to firm up their interest with an offer. There's kind of a feeling within the circle surrounding Spence that Forest kind of know that he's gonna, his favourites to his likely destination is Tottenham. Obviously, they've got Champions League football. They play a system that suits his style. Obviously, Djed Spence is more naturally a right wing back. Spurs have got quite a lot of confidence in him. Fabio Paratici's watched him in action in the FA Cup against Leicester at the City ground, and he scored that day. He was really impressive. I remember watching the game. Sort of Leicester were handed a bit of a reality check, really, by Forest, who have obviously been so impressive under Steve Cooper. They've been promoted to the top flights. There's kind of an appreciation that, Spence might not be attainable for Forest on a permanent basis. We expect him to leave Middlesbrough in due course. And I do think we'll see movement on that front in the next sort of the coming days, really. I do expect Tottenham to make an offer for Spence. And, obviously there are knock-on effects of that deal if it's to happen. Obviously, we've seen Emerson Royale as a player that Spurs would be willing to consider offers for after, less than a year at the club. You've got players like Matt Doherty as well, who have, admittedly improved a lot under Conte. He could be utilised as a squad player still, but, even if Spurs were to receive an offer, I'd expect them to maybe consider that. On the other flank, you've got Sergei Reguilon, who I expect to leave Tottenham. I think they'll look to move him on now. They've got Perisic. Ryan Sessegnong's been really good. He finished the season really strongly. And Forest are actually going to go after Issa Kabore of Manchester City. He spent last season on loan at Troyes in the French second division. Believe they are a part of the City group, so there was a clear natural development there for him. But he's one of the names Forest are looking at to bring in. So there's a few sort of movements on that front with Spence. I do expect Spurs to formalise their interest with an offer. I think 15 to 20 million pounds should be enough to get the deal done. So we'll see how that materialises. But obviously at Spurs, as most of you will be aware, there's been a lot going on recently. Alessandro Bastoni has been their top defensive target. He's left-footed, can play on the left side of the back three, which is what Conte and Paratici are currently looking for. Obviously, Ben Davies has been exceptional. He was brilliant on Sunday in Wales' World Cup playoff win over Ukraine. He'll remain part of the squad, and I expect him to be handed a new contract offer. But Spurs are looking to get to that next level now. They didn't really want to be fighting for Champions League on the final day of the season. Now they're looking to kind of close the gap on the likes of Liverpool, Manchester City, and someone like Bastoni would have been the perfect kind of acquisition to make strides there. But as you well have seen, his agent Tullio Tinti held meeting with Inter on Wednesday, and the kind of the outcome of that was that it's been sort of categorically set in stone that Bastoni will stay with Inter Milan now for he will stay with Inter for at least next season. He's still got 2 years left on his contract, so he seems to be Inter through and through. He's only sort of just come through the ranks in the past 2 to 3 years, but he wants to stay. He's in no hurry to leave at the age of 23. He does want to play under Antonio Conte at some point in his career, but for now, he doesn't seem ready to force through a move. Obviously, I know Conte is going to commit to Spurs for this season, but there are kind of doubts over his long-term future. We saw after the defeat to Burnley earlier in the season that he was kind of the unpredictable nature of Conte. He's very ruthless and sinister, and he after a bad run, he sort of his future's on the line all of a sudden. So although Tottenham are planning with him for the long term, I do think there is always that element of could it potentially go wrong quickly, as we saw at Chelsea. Didn't hang around for too long, 2 seasons, same at Inter Milan. So I do wonder if that's entered Bastoni's thinking, but there are lots of alternative targets on the club's radar. There's been swap deal talks with Villarreal over a move for Pau Torres, who's obviously a player Manchester United have looked at as well. Left-footed, can play in a back 4 or a back 3. can see why he'll be of interest to Tottenham, who looked at him last summer as well. See, Villarreal don't have European football. I think they finished 7th in La Liga, so Villarreal will be looking to potentially cash in on Torres while his stock's high. I think £45 million would be the kind of valuation for the player. But Spurs do have the trump card up their sleeve in the sense that they have Giovanni Lo Celso on their books. Obviously, he had a great season on loan at Villarreal and they're looking to sign him permanently, so it kind of makes sense to include him in a package. I do suspect Spurs would have to pay an additional figure on top of that in order to move him on. But he's not the only option they're looking at. Sven Botman is another one. We're going to come on to him in a sec in regards to Newcastle's interest in the player. There's also Clement Lenglet, who's been offered to the club from Barcelona. At the moment, it's not one of the priorities for Spurs. It's one they're sort of remaining open-minded about because Lenglet is still a good player, even though he's sort of fallen away a little bit at Barcelona. But he's left-footed, can play in a back three as well as he has done with France. So it's an option that's on the table, and it's the kind of signing, Lenglet, that it's not sexy as such, but Conte's the kind of manager that would probably be able to get something out of him that would really, get people saying, wow, why was this guy let go so easily by Barcelona? He's a good age, 25. So I do think that would be one that kind of hangs in the background, and if Spurs aren't able to attain some of their priority targets, he might be one that enters the thinking. But as of now, Tottenham are not pursuing a deal for Lenglet. The other interesting one is Gleison Bremer, who is a player Paratici knows well for sure. He was the Serie A Defender of the Year this season with Torino. I watched him a couple of times against AC Milan was one, and he just dominated Olivier Giroud, which obviously hasn't happened much this season or in the last sort of 2 to 3 seasons. Giroud's a very clever striker, but that night he didn't have a sniff at all, and Bremer seemed to just be reading everything. He was getting in front of balls, he was winning aerial duels, he was good on the ground, making late tackles. And Bremer is right-footed, so that does kind of pose questions about whether he fits the current criteria Spurs are looking for. They're after a left-sided centre-back, preferably a left-footed one as well, which is why Torres, Botman and Bastoni were of such strong interest. But I do think Bremer could be one that they look at. Obviously, there's the kind of added story that would sincerely frustrate Inter, who are in the ascendancy for Bremer. He's one of their top targets, and they're the favourites to sign him without a doubt. I do think a deal is kind of sort of advancing on that front, that Inter are looking to wrap up a deal for Bremer. But Spurs could easily, with the sell of Conte and Champions League football, if they wanted to make that deal happen and throw their hat into the ring, I do think they could ruffle a few feathers there. But at the moment, there's nothing to suggest that will happen. Obviously, the interesting point with Bastoni was, although he wanted to stay, something he kind of made clear during interviews while away on international duty with Italy. If Inter felt like a sale was necessary, see, they're still kind of suffering from the financial struggles they've experienced in the past few seasons, which was why they sold Hakimi and Romelu Lukaku last summer after winning the Serie A title. Bastoni was a signing that would automatically sort of recoup a significant figure for them. So it would be easy to see why they would be sort of open to the idea of exploring that. But following the meeting with Tinti, it looks like he will definitely be staying. But another interesting one is Milan Skriniar, who's attracting interest from Paris Saint-Germain. He's another one that would sort of bring in sort of 40 to 50 million pounds. And if Bastoni doesn't want to go, I think that would be one that Inter potentially look at. He's got a fairly long-term contract, I believe, with Inter. He's already said that he doesn't want to leave the club, but he's one Tottenham have looked at in the past. I remember Steve Hitchen flew to Milan to try and close a deal in August 2020. It didn't quite come off for Tottenham. But, he's one that, you wouldn't be surprised if Spurs were to turn attentions to him. And I'm not suggesting that is something that's going to happen. I have no information on that. But if Inter are sort of willing to consider a sale, then, stylistically, he'd be one that would make sense for Tottenham, given that he plays in a back three. He's at a good age. He's experienced now, and he's kind of at that level where he would genuinely improve the side. So that's Spurs in a nutshell. And there are other targets and stuff at the moment for Tottenham, but that's the kind of main focus at the moment, that centre-back spot, and Spence, who, like I said, I do expect them to firm up their interest. Just moving on now to Nick Pope, who's an interesting one. I've kind of covered a lot of the Burnley players that could move on in various quarters. We've got Maxwell Cornet, who's got a relegation clause in his contract worth around about £17 million. That was revealed by David Ornstein of The Athletic. Wout Weghorst is another one that is expected to move on, but Pope, I don't expect him to be at Burnley next season, but the kind of interesting factor with Pope is the clubs that have been interested in him in the previous transfer windows have all kind of moved on to other goalkeepers now, so it doesn't really open up too many avenues for him in terms of where he could end up. See, the majority of the big six clubs now have a goalkeeper in place. You've got Edouard Mendy at Chelsea. You've got Aaron Ramsdale, who signed for Arsenal last summer. Obviously, Alisson and Edison at Liverpool, Manchester City. Hugo Lloris signed a new 2-year contract with Tottenham as well. And De Gea as well looks stronger than ever, really, at Manchester United. So it does pose questions as to who would really be looking at Pope. I think Newcastle would be one, that hypothetically it is a possibility. But Nottingham Forest look like a club that could potentially throw their hat into the ring. See, Bryce Samba looks like, we've seen in recent days again, reported by David Ornstein, that he's probably not going to sign a new contract with Forest. But I reached out to Pope's representatives, but they said they're not willing to comment on transfer speculation. But from the kind of information that I've been building, I expect him to seal a return to the Premier League, and I don't expect him to be with Burnley next season. I think Burnley, one of the names that they've been looking at if Pope was to move on is Muric, who obviously Company knows well from his time at Manchester City. We expect Company to take over at Turf Moor now with a deal seemingly close for him to replace Michael Jackson after the departure of Sean Dyche. So Nick Pope's one to keep an eye on. I think once international duty's been concluded, I think behind the scenes his representatives may start to put the feelers out for if there are any clubs that are looking to sign the player. The kind of problem is, Burnley are going to sort of seek a premium fee, £30 to £40 million. I know there has been interest from Fulham in the past. Not in the past, but sort of in the past 6 months, because I believe Fulham have money to spend, and although goalkeeper's not a priority for them, it's one they will probably look at. So it'll be interesting to see what materialises for Nick Pope. Moving on now, just a story that I didn't break as such, but there was a statement Arsenal released earlier confirming their departures for the summer. And on there was Eddie Nketiah, which, although it was stated in brackets, contract offered, talks ongoing, a source firmed up for me that Arsenal were expected to announce that Nketiah is staying and signed a new contract within the coming days. They've also finally resolved the issues surrounding a deal for 19-year-old Sao Paulo winger, Marquinhos. There had been an element of concern with that deal because Wolves felt like they had a pre-contract agreement in place with the Brazilian. But Arsenal have now resolved that, and they're expected to confirm that he'll be staying at the club in the coming days. There have been interest from the likes of Crystal Palace, but Nketiah obviously turned his Arsenal career around really in the final stretches of the season when he was handed a starting berth. He scored braces against Leeds and Chelsea, also notched on the final day of the season against Everton. But Nketiah is set to stay, and Arsenal will then probably move on to firming up their interest in Gabriel Jesus, who we obviously know is their priority target, but a deal's not been easy despite the arrival of Erling Haaland, because there's kind of a lot of people involved in a deal for Jesus, but I do expect them to make a bid, and the same applies for Yuri Tielemans as well. And I just wanted to wrap up with just a quick summarisation of my interview with Bayer Leverkusen Director of Sports Simon Rolfes, a really nice, friendly guy who is clearly very smart in what he's trying to do at Leverkusen. There's a clear structure and plan in place for their project. They have clear ideas and strategies about what they wanted to do. I'm going to have a big interview dropping with him in the next week or so on Leverkusen's project and what they're doing and how they're trying to close the gap on the likes of Dortmund and Bayern with smart recruitment. I really do believe that Leverkusen are one of the finest operators in Europe when it comes to signing young talent and sort of elevating their potential to the next level, as I discussed extensively with Rolfes. You can see a little snippet of my interview on my Instagram at Ryan Taylor Express. Like I said, I'm going to be having the stories come from that, but one of the major talking points from that interview was that Leverkusen weren't actually interested in Nketiah. Their name was kind of being used in contract negotiations just to stir the pot, and Rolfes confirmed to me that he was never an option for them. They are very happy with their forward options after tying Patrick Schick down to a new contract. That's always been on the agenda for Leverkusen. And Moussa Diaby was a player we discussed at length as well. The vast improvements he's made in the past 2 seasons since arriving from Paris Saint-Germain, but Rolfes ruled out a summer transfer for Diaby. There's been extensive speculation in England on his future, with Newcastle expected to firm up talks for the player, who's valued at around £60 million. He don't have a release clause, but Rolfes categorically ruled out a move to Newcastle this summer. He said that Leverkusen want to keep all of their top players for as long as possible, namely Diaby, and they won't consider offers as they seek to continue playing with the forward in the Champions League this season after securing the return of the competition. There was another snippet as well. Mykhailo Mudryk, who was a player that was on show on Sunday against Wales. He was excellent in this season's Champions League group stages with Shakhtar. And obviously with the situation there in Ukraine, he's looking to find a new club, and he will find that in Bayer Leverkusen. I believe he's undergone a medical already. The only kind of thing holding up the deal at the moment is that there's kind of visa issues for the player to arrive in Germany, and I do expected that deal to be confirmed in due course. Although Rolfes remained tight-lipped on that, he didn't really want to discuss it at all. So yeah, just want to touch on Botman actually. Sorry, I've missed that out. Newcastle, Sven Botman. They are back at the table after failing with 2 rejected January bids. He is a player that is been identified as Steve Nixon's undisputed top defensive target in Newcastle. He's a player they've watched at length, which is why they were sort of hell-bent on landing him in January, but it didn't quite come off. Obviously, AC Milan then entered the fray. They invited his representative to the San Siro to watch an AC Milan game, and they then held extensive talks in April, and it looked like Botman was heading to AC Milan, but now Newcastle were back in the driving seat. From what I understand, there's an offer that's been submitted to Lille worth upwards of £30 million, including add-ons, for Botman, which is their highest offer to date yet for the defender, and I expect him to leave Lille this summer. And the way negotiations are kind of going, it looks like Newcastle are going to be getting to a stage where they can discuss personal terms with the player. The only kind of issue they have at the moment is there's other competitors. You know, I mentioned Milan, but obviously Spurs as well. United could even enter the fray for Botman. He's not a player that's out of reach financially. He's only valued at around about £30 million, so he's very achievable for any club that wants to sign him. Obviously, Newcastle don't have Champions League football that they're able to offer. So if a club with Champions League football was able to enter the running, you know, it would pose questions as to whether Tottenham can get a deal over the line. Newcastle can get a deal over the line, but the indications at the moment are good. It looks like, you know, Newcastle, if they play their cards right, if they go about negotiations the way they are at the moment, they will reach a positive conclusion. But like I said, I've from the people I've been speaking to involved in the deal, the kind of message that's been relayed repeatedly is that don't rule out AC Milan or other suitors. It's very much not sort of straight and narrow as Newcastle have a clear run on the player, although, you know, admittedly they're moving towards the finish line now. So that's kind of what's happening at the moment with Botman. But I'm going to be back with a few more videos now in the coming days and weeks. Obviously, we're going to be leading right now up till the end of the window in August. I might do a Q&A, but as always, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share it. Feel free to take information from the video if you want to credit me, and use my Twitter as a source of information of transfer news. But yeah, the videos are back. Appreciate you listening, and I'll speak to you all again soon.